If you like what you see in the video, please leave a like and subscribe, it really helps me out, and maybe check out my Patreon and social media in the description. So PewDiePie is a guy I have criticised before. Now what actually happened when I last criticised him was numerous other way bigger right-wing channels made videos on me, and of course my channel got brigaded by loads of lovely people who totally weren't proving my point that PewDiePie is part of the pipeline, at the very least, to the alt-right. They came in with lovely racist comments, loads of stuff directed at me, which was really insulting. Some people were even being racist to me, which I know it seems hard to believe that looking at me, I look like a white person, but some of them were so racist, they were saying because I have dark hair, a beard and dark eyes, I must actually have Muslim or Jewish blood, and I'm not actually a white person, according to a lot of these lovely PewDiePie fans. Now, there's that old saying, isn't there, that when someone reveals to you who they are, believe them the first time, right? So when PewDiePie makes all these gaffes that are racist, when he says all these awful stuff, you can maybe say it was a meme and it was a joke, like a lot of people do, but when he continually says it, when he drops hints of who he really is, then that's who I believe he is. Now, obviously, he's had horrible people on his show, like Ben Shapiro. Don't need to get into how much of a racist that guy is, all the awful things he said about LGBT people, all the bad things he said about Arabs and Palestinians, but he had that on his show, really giving this guy mass appeal to children, which is nice. Obviously, he said the N-word live on stream in a a fit of anger. He said something like this. Again, when someone shows who they really are, believe them the first time, and this is not even the first time. Made loads of jokes talking about Nazis, making light of the Holocaust, all these different things. So it's not surprising he actually has a pretty prominent alt-right fan base. But lately on stream, he's dropped another hint of who he really is when he's talking about the migration crisis, which of course is a term that lots of people like to use as a stand-in for the refugee crisis. And I'm going to get into why that matters after I play you the clip here.
Most studied languages at Duolingo in some countries. Sweden learning Sweden. Mass immigration, everyone. How about that? Wait, what? That's it, right? I think they say it.
So if you don't understand what you've just seen, he's looking at a graph that is basically saying, what is the #1 language people learn in different countries? Now in Sweden, the #1 language people are learning is Swedish. So he angrily states, mass immigration, everyone. You can hear it in his voice what he's saying. He obviously disapproves of mass migration, mass immigration. So why is this a problem? So somehow he has a problem with lots of people learning Swedish. I thought what people normally say, that I don't mind that if migrants come here and I guess adhere to our cultural norms, they learn the language when they're perfectly acceptable. Or if they really buy into all our Western values, and I got no problem with them. But obviously in the tone of his voice, it obviously annoys him. And obviously in Sweden, the far right have really been rejuvenated. And a lot of neo-Nazis with Scandinavian symbols, more Viking symbols, have been in my comments lately saying about how they're not racist, they just want to keep their culture the way it is and everything like that. Now, he's talking about mass migration, and of course, in Western countries, migration has increased. Now, in terms of the framing of this, it's quite important to understand where different people come from, right? So, in actual fact, it's not a migration crisis, it's a refugee crisis. Thousands and thousands of people from the Middle East and North Africa didn't just wake up one morning and be like, do you know what, I really fancy a change, let's all move to Europe and Scandinavia. Because I just fancy it, to be honest. What actually happens is they are either living under an authoritarian government which is propped up by the West, or their country is in the midst of a civil war, with the West obviously intervening. So if you have Libyans, of course, loads of Libyans going to Spain and Italy, why would Libyans be freeing Libya? Maybe it's because Gaddafi was toppled, mainly with British support for these rebels, and a lot of these rebels actually happen to be Al-Qaeda, and then the whole country really goes to shit, and it's a massive problem in Libya right now. So, do you blame people for leaving after what our government, our British government specifically, has helped carry out in that country? Obviously, Syria is another one. Of course, Assad was in bed, not just with Russia, he's been in bed with the West for ages. What Assad has always offered the West is that Syria is a relatively ripe economy for them to exploit. And with Assad Jr. coming in at the turn of the century, they've seen someone they can really do business with a bit more. He also has an influence over Iran and Hezbollah. So they've always liked to deal with Assad, even though they pretended they haven't done. But of course, when his people rose up, America got involved. They didn't want Russia to have as big an influence in the Middle East. And the Civil War really kicked off. Probably, obviously one of the worst wars in my lifetime. Causes a massive refugee crisis. Causes a massive refugee crisis, not just to the surrounding area, millions of Syrians going to places like Turkey, and of course many more going on to Europe. So the West is culpable in a lot of these instances, and of course there is just situations which are just fundamentally messed up, and there's a lot of conflict going on in that region at the moment. So what does that cause? It causes a refugee crisis. And it's no coincidence the amount of people coming to Europe from these countries has increased since the Arab Spring started and all these civil wars took place. So, yes, these people didn't just wake up one morning and said, let's all mass migrate to Sweden, please, because we just really want to go to Sweden. Not that I'm so desperate, I just want to flee this country and I'm going to go to somewhere where, A, I have family. That people don't understand these refugees, the reason they don't always just go to the next country is because they're going to somewhere where they have some security, some family, something to really help them. That's why a lot of them don't just go to Turkey and stay there, although a lot of them do. A lot of them do go to Europe for the promise of a better life with their families, or just because part of being in the West is like, look at our system of government, look at our freedoms, come here and make it. We don't discriminate on any of you. If you come here and work hard, if you come here and learn the language, we'll be accepting of you. Now, I can already see the right-wingers watching this video and be like, oh, you're just looking too much into what PewDiePie says. And what I want to explain to them is what a dog whistle is. Now, I know they can't really understand that because if you're on the right wing, you have to have everything spelled out to you. And even if you do say legitimately racist stuff like PewDiePie, explicitly racist stuff, they still dismiss it as, an edgy joke or something. That's why you always have people making apologies for Donald Trump, even when he's outwardly racist. But basically, a dog whistle is when someone uses a term that is socially acceptable to really push their agenda, but not explicitly say what they mean. So mass migration is something used by the right wing and the far right and the alt-right. It's never talked about as a refugee crisis. It's always mass migration. These people are coming here, destroying our culture, all this stuff. That's why it makes PewDiePie angry that the number one language being learnt in Sweden is Swedish. Not that it should make someone like that happy, that these people are coming in, they're assimilating to your culture, they're learning the language to make themselves more compatible with your country. You're mad that the number one language is Sweden because it means more brown people in your country. And you saw people in the alt-right promoting this tweet and saying how good it was. But again, if this is a one-off instance where someone talked about mass migration rather than the refugee crisis, you might give them the benefit of the doubt. But when it's someone like PewDiePie, with numerous racist incidents in his past, numerous times appealing to the alt-right. Obviously, I made my video about that whole thing to do with anti-Semitism, and of course, him making a donation to the Anti-Defamation League and then pulling it because he says he doesn't like what they stand for. And of course, there are legitimate problems with the Anti-Defamation League, like how they often ignore Palestinian rights, but of course, PewDiePie didn't pull this because he cares about Palestinians. But yeah, what people need to understand, a dog whistle is when someone like this, someone who has a history, someone who's had numerous controversial things, then says something like this, and where you can pick apart what he actually means with his words and say this fits with the awful character he often displays. This is why white supremacists like him. This is why the alt-right like him. And again, believe who someone is when they show you the first time. How many times is this now? Like maybe 6 or 7 times? So yeah, PewDiePie is trash, and obviously he makes the platform worse for the rest of us because with every controversy, YouTube really shits themselves and the adpocalypse happens. And it will probably happen again with someone like this who's the biggest person on the platform. Again, this one was only minor compared to what he said in the past, but I thought I made a video on it just to highlight how these people really push this agenda without saying something controversial. And it would go over a lot of people's heads, to be honest, if you talk about the migration crisis as opposed to the refugee crisis. But when you're talking about how people on the far right make these types of things acceptable, they have to use language that is socially acceptable. And that is straight out of the David Duke playbook. He's the one who made this really awful white supremacy in America, he made it more palatable because he wasn't a guy walking around in a clown robe. He wasn't talking in really violent, racist terms. He phrased it as, our cultures are just not compatible. We should keep them more separate. And then really, it's plausible deniability. So if someone says to PewDiePie, you know, do you think there's a problem with you saying mass migration? He'll just be like, but there's a lot of migration coming through these countries, you know, and it's a lot of it coming to Sweden. They might make some problems up. Like, I think it's Marla Yiannopoulos who's pushed this thing. They're bringing their awful culture. Look what happened in Cologne and everything. And it's just a concerted effort by these countries to flood Europe with a different culture and take over Europe. Because obviously what factors into mass migration is people being scared they'll be replaced. White genocide, which I'm sure PewDiePie privately believes it. Now, I don't know if PewDiePie is just a massive idiot or he is on the alt-right. I'll leave that for you to decide. Obviously, from my perspective, I believe he leans towards the alt-right. Anyone who's okay with saying this stuff and having Ben Shapiro on their channel that primarily appeals to children is someone I think's on the alt-right. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Please follow me on social media at The Tabernacle. Twitter is the main one, but also Facebook and Instagram. If you're on Reddit, please subscribe to my subreddit, which is r/thetabernacle. Check out my personal Reddit, which is just u/Tommy Cahill 1995. Check out my Patreon and my WordPress in the description. On screen, this is my new setup paid for by Patreon money. But I do want to say something. Obviously, now is really difficult times for the world. Money's tight. So if you're a patron, listen to this. Please reconsider being a patron. Maybe cancel your pledges and everything at this time. I don't want anyone giving me money when they can't afford it. So maybe reconsider. Of course, if any of you want to become patrons and you have some spare cash or whatever, that's totally fine. But please, if you don't have this money, don't consider doing it. And if you are a patron and it's really putting a hole in your pocket or it's just a bit of extra money that you need, please stop being one. And maybe one day you can come back or don't. It doesn't really matter. So please don't put yourself out just to give me a little bit of money to make my setup better for YouTube. Please, I have a job. This stuff is just extra for all the hard work I put in. But I'm financially secure compared to a lot of people because I have savings, because I have a full-time job still and I can work from home. So please reconsider it maybe if you do subscribe to my Patreon. Anyway, that is all, and thank you for watching this video.